He offered me $11 million before he even said good morning. That was the kind of man Nathaniel Vance was. He walked into my shop on a Tuesday morning in early October, dressed like he'd stepped out of a magazine about men who never worry about rain, and he set a folder on my counter like it was a formality I should be grateful for. "I'll pay triple what the building's worth," he said. "You won't find a better offer in this city." I didn't answer right away. I was in the middle of re-sewing the spine of a 100-year-old hymnal, my needles still threaded, my hands still steady, and I let this silence sit there long enough for him to realize I wasn't going to fill it with gratitude. My name is Adaze Boateng, and the shop behind me, narrow, quiet, smelling of leather and old paper and beeswax, had been my grandmother's before it was mine. She started it in the back room of a laundromat 40 years ago, restoring Bibles for churches who couldn't afford new ones, mending ledgers for shopkeepers who couldn't afford to lose their records. By the time she handed me the keys, it had a name in this city, not a famous one, a trusted one. People brought me the things they couldn't replace: the family Torah with a great-grandmother's handwriting in the margins, the plantation-era ledger a great-nephew wanted preserved, not celebrated, the water-stained diary of a soldier who never came home. I didn't just repair paper, I kept people's memories from disappearing. Nathaniel Vance didn't care about any of that. To him, my building was 4,000 square feet of prime downtown real estate, standing between him and a glass tower he'd already named before he owned the land. "It's not for sale," I told him. He smiled like I hadn't understood the number. "Take some time. Talk to your family. 11 million changes things." "My grandmother's name is on the deed," I said. "She's been gone 6 years. I'm not selling her name out from under her." He left that day the way rich men leave when they're used to getting what they want eventually, unbothered, almost amused, like my refusal was a stage in a negotiation rather than an answer. I wish I could tell you that was the end of it. It wasn't even the beginning of the hard part. Within 2 weeks, a city inspector I'd never met before found 6 code violations in a building that had passed every inspection for a decade. Within a month, my insurance company sent a letter citing elevated risk factors and tripled my premium. Within 6 weeks, the small business loan I'd been counting on to replace my aging climate control system was mysteriously denied, despite 11 years of on-time payments. None of it had his name on it. All of it had his fingerprints. I want to be honest about something. There were nights I sat in that shop after closing, staring at the shelves my grandmother built with her own hands, and I let myself imagine what $11 million would feel like. Not the number, the relief. No more worrying about the roof. No more choosing between fixing the humidity system and making payroll for my one part-time assistant. I imagined it, and then I remembered the way my grandmother used to say, in that voice she saved for the things she meant most, "We didn't come this far to be bought quiet." She never explained exactly what she meant by that. I always assumed she meant the shop. I would come to learn she meant something much older and much heavier than a building. It was a Thursday in late November when the estate ledger arrived. A family from 3 counties over had cleared out a deceased relative's storage unit and found a water-damaged account book from the 1960s, the leather cracked, half the pages fused together with age and damp. They didn't know what it was, they just knew it looked important, and they wanted it saved before it was gone. I worked on that ledger for 11 nights, peeling pages apart with a bone folder, one careless motion away from destroying 70 years of ink. It was slow, monastic work, the kind that empties your mind of everything except the page in front of you. On the 9th night, tucked between 2 pages that had been stuck together before I was born, I found a photograph. It was small, black and white, corners softened with age. A young man stood in front of a modest storefront, his arm around an older woman who was clearly his mother. Behind them, barely visible in the frame, was a sign for a small tailoring business. On the back, in fading pencil, someone had written a name and a date, 1961, and beneath it, 3 words, Vance and Sons, founders. I sat with that photograph for a long time before I understood what I was looking at. The ledger wasn't just an account book. It was a record, dates, debts, signatures, belonging to a small Black-owned tailoring shop that had once stood 2 blocks from where I was sitting, and according to the entries, in 1962, that shop had loaned its entire savings to a young white man starting a construction business, a loan that was never repaid, a business that grew into something enormous while the small tailoring shop that funded it closed within 2 years, unable to recover. Repayment in full, with gratitude, within the year. The young man's name was written clearly on the final page, beside a signature promising Harold Vance, Nathaniel's grandfather. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was angry, though I was, but because I understood, suddenly and completely, what my grandmother meant. She had known this family's name for decades. She had watched Nathaniel's empire rise from a corner she used to walk past as a girl, built, in part, on a debt that was never made right. And she never used it. She never sold it, never leveraged it, never even told me. She just kept saying, "We didn't come this far to be bought quiet." And I finally understood she wasn't talking about my shop. She was talking about our silence being worth more than his money, and our dignity being worth more than his guilt. I could have gone to him with that photograph like a weapon. I could have threatened to take it to the papers, to his investors, to the historical society that would have loved a story about generational theft dressed up as ambition. Part of me wanted to. I won't pretend otherwise. Instead, I called his office and asked for 15 minutes. He came himself. I think he expected me to finally be ready to negotiate. I set the photograph on the counter between us, next to the ledger, open to the page with his grandfather's signature. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Your grandfather borrowed against a family's entire life savings. He never paid it back. The shop that gave him his start closed within 2 years. I don't think you knew that. I don't think anyone in your family talks about it. He picked up the photograph with both hands, the way you hold something you're afraid might dissolve. I watched something shift behind his eyes. Not performance, not the practiced concern of a man managing a PR risk, but something quieter. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of it. "He's never seen this," he said. "I didn't know his business started like this." "I'm not telling you this so you'll feel guilty," I said. "I'm telling you because you walked into my shop and offered to erase my grandmother's name like it was worth nothing. And I need you to understand that names like ours have always been the ones erased to build names like yours. I'm not selling, not because I want to punish you, because I finally understood why my grandmother never would have." He didn't say much after that. He asked if he could have a copy of the photograph. I told him he could have the original, that it was never mine to keep, that some things need to go back to where they came from before they can mean anything. He left quietly that day, in a way that felt different from the first time, not defeated, not performing humility either, just genuinely smaller than the number he'd offered me weeks before. I didn't hear from him for almost a month. When I did, it wasn't a check. It was a letter, handwritten, which surprised me more than any amount of money could have. He wrote that he'd pulled his grandfather's old business records, found the same debt buried in an old file, confirmed everything I'd shown him. He wrote that he was setting up a scholarship in the tailoring family's name for young entrepreneurs in the neighborhood his grandfather's fortune had displaced. He wrote that he was withdrawing his offer on my building permanently and instructing his company to leave me alone. He didn't ask for anything in return, not a partnership, not a mention, not forgiveness. I think for the first time in his life, he understood that some debts aren't the kind you settle by writing a bigger check. They're the kind you settle by finally telling the truth about how you got rich in the first place. I still run the shop.
It still smells like leather and old paper and beeswax. My grandmother's name is still on the deed, and it always will be. I framed a copy of that photograph, not the original. I mailed that to the tailoring family's descendants myself and hung it near the front counter, where I can see it every morning when I unlock the door. People still bring me things they can't replace. I still spend my nights peeling fragile pages apart, one careful motion at a time, saving what other people would have let disintegrate. I think about my grandmother almost every day in that shop. I think about how she carried a truth for 40 years and never once used it as a weapon because she understood something I only learned the hard way. That dignity isn't proven by what you're willing to expose. It's proven by what you're willing to protect, even when protecting it costs you more than staying silent ever would have. Nathaniel Vance offered me $11 million for a building. He never understood that some things were never for sale, until a day an old photograph reminded him exactly what his family's fortune had cost and exactly who had been paying for it, quietly, for 60 years.